right? So chemistry. Physics, sunshine, light energy, physics coming down from the sky. There's moonlight coming down from the sky. There's the magnetic field of the earth is a factor, okay? There's a whole lot of things we don't have time to go into today. But biology are the workers. They're the working class. They leverage chemistry and physics to create nutrient density at the bottom of the food chain. So let's dive into each of these just a little bit. As you're setting up your homestead, you'll probably get some advice. Not going to fault this at all. Send off some of your soil to a lab and see what minerals are in it. That's chemistry, right? I'm looking at what minerals are in my soil. They're going to take your soil samples and put some caustic acids on that soil, leach out the minerals, quantify those minerals, and tell you how much you got per acre. That in and of itself is data. Neither good or bad. In 1983, New Farm Magazine did a little study on this. They sent the exact same sample to 70 different labs across the country. They got 70 different recommendations back on what farmers should put on the same soil sample. So I tell you that just to have a grain of salt as you get recommendations back from the laboratory. What are their recommendations based upon? Nutrient density is not one of the factors. It's generally quantity, if you will. So, not that this is bad. I'm just trying to give you some insight. Where do you want to spend your money on the farm? This is another version of a soil test, which I just did this last year for the first time. This was developed, I think, in, say, the early 1900s. But they use less caustic acids in this process, and their goal is to mimic the acids available in the soil. So it better reflects what nutrients are plant available. That makes sense to you. That's the theory behind this test. And I like this test. It was really loved by this guy, Dr. Kerry Reams. You can see he's passed away already in 1985. But he did a lot of phenomenal research. So he's got proof, data behind everything he says. This is his recipe for a healthy, generic, healthy soil. You should have this kind of mineral content per acre based upon this test called the Lamott test. So just something to consider as you go ahead. Where do I want to, place my beliefs and my thoughts? So these minerals are important. So if you think you're mineral deficient, or the test shows you're mineral deficient, where do you get minerals? What's cost effective? Well, you can get minerals from, first of all, the sand silt clay. It's already there. Now, you may not have everything you need. So then what can I leverage? I can leverage rock dusts, things like azomite, things like volcanic rock that's broken up, limestone. All of them have their chemical properties that they bring to your soil, so you can affect the available minerals in the ground. Blood meal, bone meal, sea salt. We're going to talk more about sea salt. I don't mean the stuff, the Morton stuff at the store. I mean actual dehydrated seawater, and you got the salt left over. That is truly sea salt. We'll talk more about that. Of course, any organic matter you have. If you throw down old leaves, those old leaves are a collection of minerals, and so you're redepositing that into your soil. There are, of course, commercial products. Just a caution on the commercial products. There's good, there's not so good. This year, when I asked, I'm not going to name anybody and I'm not going to blame anybody, but what is common during the spring is to put potash on your pasture. That's a common recommendation. Oh, potash prices are down. It's a good time to put on potash, okay? The form of potash we had available for my farm locally came in the form of potassium chloride. I'm in search of the potassium, but it came 50-50 with chloride. What do you use to disinfect a swimming pool? Chlorine, right? So they told me to put on up to 125 pounds of potassium chloride on my pasture. If I convert that to the same lingo I use in a swimming pool, that is about 20 times the amount of chlorine I would use to disinfect the swimming pool. Do you think that's going to impact my biology? Oh, heck yeah. I might see some very short-term improvement in my pasture, but at what cost? I killed off my workers. and I paid somebody a lot of money to haul this junk in and dump it on my field. Now, how do I undo that? Because I got a bunch of chlorine now on my field. So that's just a caution. Sea salt. Dehydrated seawater. You're left with sea salt. That has essentially the 90 minerals that you and I need within our body. We need all 90. We haven't explored all that yet, but I would submit we need all 90. The example I used yesterday to drive home the point, in World War II, in the Pacific, when the doctors didn't have enough blood for transfusions, they actually filtered seawater and used that for transfusions. The mineral match in that filtered seawater was perfect to match blood plasma. What does that tell you? I'm not claiming to have all the answers by any means, but that tells me you can benefit from all the minerals in seawater. So this was a great book written by Maynard Murray. He started to think about this in the early 1900s or 1950s, somewhere in there. He said, you know what, when I look at sea creatures, they aren't sick. I can find a saltwater sea trout and a freshwater sea trout. The saltwater guy never gets sick. The freshwater guy does. What's the difference? His hypothesis was all the sea creatures are highly mineralized. Wow, no kidding. They live in minerals 24/7, 365, don't they? They're highly mineralized. So there's been studies done to reflect the same thing in human population. The Hunsacuts out in the Hunza, they drink highly mineralized water, and they don't have cancer, and they don't have all kinds of problems. So there's a thought behind that. Anyway, sea minerals are something you can use in your garden. You can create a foliar spray from sea salt, spray it on your plants if you need to, and we'll talk a little bit more about that in a minute. You can apply sea salt directly on your soil. Here's the bottom right is a recipe that I have tried already. Hybricksgardens.com is a great resource for this. They recommended about 43 pounds per acre of sea salt. And I love Redmond sea salt. It's a brand name. They have a booth out here. If you haven't met them yet, I recommend go talk to the Redmond sea salt guys. They have a great product. I feed it to my cattle. My cattle need all the same minerals I do to make them healthy, so that's what I feed them. I use it in my garden, use it in my pasture, etc. I'm still experimenting and learning. Will always be. You can make foliar products out of this. I throw up C90 as well. That's another such product. It just depends what's available where you live. But Redmond's a great product. They've also, I just learned, come out with a soil test as well for the home gardener. Go back and talk to them about that. You may not even have to spend the money to send it off to a lab, depending upon your intent. You can do your own kind of soil sample with the equipment they give you and get enough information from that. Okay, let's look into the physics. Plants are energy accumulators. They need energy. So do we. They get energy from things like the sunlight. 16 years ago, I would have thought this was BS, frankly. But moonlight matters. Starlight matters. You know, the astrology tables, there is something to that. I don't have it all figured out, but it affects plants. The Earth's magnetic field affects plants. I saw this firsthand this year. I planted about 400 trees. I read somewhere that when a new seed germinates, it orients its roots to the north-south magnetic lines on planet Earth. So it will send out a longer root, or the preponderance of roots, to magnetic north. I had 400 samples to look at. Lo and behold, almost every one had an extra long root or a preponderance of roots in one direction. So as I planted them, I had my compass. I dug the hole such that that root was going to stay oriented north. You know, they're not old enough that I can tell, but fascinating to me. If you want to blow your mind a little bit, read these two books, Secrets of the Soil and The Secret Life of Plants. Things that, again, 15 years ago, I would have thought I was really smoking something to have any belief in it. But I no longer am doubtful at all. I work with this stuff enough to see it now. Music. There are studies using music. Your personal energy. Have you ever heard Garden with Love? That matters. I said this yesterday. Don't believe a thing I say. Go out and do your own research. But there's a lot of good research behind it. Your love for your plants is picked up by your plants. You will help them grow. No different than the love for each other. Your love for your son or daughter is picked up body to body. Same thing. Okay, the biology. They're the workers. So they leverage the stuff we just talked about. They're the caretakers of the plants. Microbiome lives on the plant surface. Does a plant have a stomach? No, you can't think of that. You can visualize your stomach in digestive tract, right? Loaded with microbes. Now think about taking and turning that inside out and sticking it in the ground. That's how a plant's digestive system works. The microbes are in and around the roots, digesting the plant food and feeding the plant. Mother Nature uses the same system for the plants as she does to take care of us. So they are the caretakers. So where does nutrient density truly come from? What's the root source? The little guys in my test tube. We cannot create a nutrient-dense carrot without these guys any more than we can create wine without yeast or bread without yeast, right? We leverage microorganisms. These are the only guys who know the recipe. You have no idea when to feed your carrot lithium, do you? Nope. Boron? Nope. Selenium? Nope. These guys figure all that out and do it. So how's that look visually? Well, there's a plant. Photosynthesis is feeding that plant energy. That plant is using chemistry to create sugars. Simple sugars that it converts into higher level metabolites, things like amino acids, chitin, lignin, all those kinds of things are produced, and it makes the actual leaves of the plant. It makes the roots. And within the root zone, within the top 3 inches primarily, there are loads of bacteria and fungi that communicate directly with that plant. There's an intelligence there we never understand, but they're basically talking back and forth. Hey, Bob, I need some more calcium. Okay, here you go. That kind of exchange is going on underneath the ground. So that is their digestive system, is underground. Now, what do the microbes get in return? That plant produces sugars and pumps up to half of it into the soil. That's a picture of sugar from the root of a plant. So it makes sugar, pumps up to 40% of it into the ground to feed the microbes. So that's the reward the microbes get for doing the work for the plant. So as we understand it, plants are capable of producing hundreds, if not more, different types of sugars. That's the intelligence I'm talking about. They want to talk to Bob, they make Bob's favorite sugar. They want to talk to Susie Fungus, they make Susie Fungus' favorite sugar. So let's zoom into this a little bit. Bacteria. Bacteria, I'm oversimplifying again, but bacteria are great at devouring simple foods, high nitrogen foods, things like manure, things like grass clippings. They, of course, eat the sugar from the plant, but when it comes to devouring recycled things or recycling things, they eat high nitrogen things. If you and I fell over dead on the ground, bacteria would be all over us, recycling us for plant food. In fact, many of those bacteria would come from within us. We are a walking recyclable container. Our microbes, once our life energy is gone, will come to life, devour us, and convert us to plant food if we don't intercept that with formaldehyde, whatever else. So bacteria eat the simple stuff, and they also fix nitrogen. Here's a picture of that in our garden. We planted hairy vetch as a legume. And when I pulled the plants up in the spring to plant the garden, what did I see? Those nodules in the root zone. That is a visual. Rhizobium bacteria physically grew in conjunction with the roots, and those little nodules are nitrogen-fixing factories. So they're pulling nitrogen out of the air and feeding that plant, or the plants you're going to plant there next. Fungi, they eat more complicated stuff. Things like wood chips, leaves, probably our bones, if, again, to my original crude example. They're going to eat the tougher things and recycle those. That is a strand of fungi right there. I love seeing those guys under the microscope because usually that's what our dirt is deficient in, is these guys. Bacteria reproduce every 20 minutes, so it's hard to totally get rid of them. You can whittle down which species are there to our own detriment, but you can't really get rid of them. Fungi you can pretty much get rid of with herbicides, pesticides, etc. Here's an example of fungi. We had a winter cover crop, again, hairy vetch. What did I find? I found fungi going to work in the soil. Excited to see that in the spring. Mycorrhizae fungi. If you've heard of those, this is a special type of fungus. It actually grows into symbiotically with the root of the plant. See the root on the left? It is naked with no mycorrhizal fungi on it. It's just the plant only, the physical plant root. See how sparse it is? Add mycorrhizal fungi to it, and you can just immediately see the increased surface area. You can obviously see this plant's going to be more nutrient dense, right? It has the ability to suck up so much more water, calcium, everything else. Plus the mycorrhizae are delivering calcium to that plant. So mycorrhizal fungi are a unique one, and as we understand it, they live like this on 95% of the plants we know of. So they're very diverse, all over the place, and very, very important. If you get back a little further, the mycorrhizae actually create an underground internet. We'll connect from plant to plant. And intelligence, again, we do not know. But believe it or not, research will tell you, mama tree on the right drops a seed, junior starts to grow, mama knows junior. Through the mycorrhizal network, if junior's not getting enough sunlight, needs some more sugar, mama maple can pump some sugar to junior. That's the kind of stuff that goes on in here. So as you start to understand this, you can think, oh, wow, what if I run my plow through there? What if I take a bulldozer and run through there? Well, you at least understand what havoc you've just created on a beautiful, beautiful life force. So these are predators in the soil, another organism, protozoa. These guys eat bacteria. So these are the lions making sure there aren't too many antelope running around. These guys are phenomenal. They eat about 10,000 bacteria a day. Their poop is perfect fertilizer for the plant. So this is going on in the ground. Another predator is nematodes. These guys are eating 10,000 bacteria a day. Nematodes come in different shapes and sizes. Some of them eat fungi, some of them eat bacteria. So they keep things in check. And they deliver poop that's nutrient rich. So this is, you're starting to hopefully see there's an underground symbiosis, an underground jungle, that if we can help promote, we're all better off. So now I want to look in on your thinking. This is a tough rut to get out of because we've all been taught this pretty much our entire lives. I know I have. I've been pretty much taught that if I plant a plant, I'm absolutely going to have bugs come and get it. What's the root cause? I didn't buy enough 7 dust at Lowe's. Right? I mean, that's kind of a common industrial mindset. You plant a plant, you're begging for bugs, be ready with the insecticide. Weeds, we think they always grow no matter what. What's the root cause? A lack of herbicide. Of course. Let me get some Roundup at Lowe's and get rid of those weeds, or 2,4-D, or whatever it is. We think that humans need to feed our plants. We're not smart enough. The only tools we have in our kit are nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium, right? I think we determined I don't feed them selenium or cobalt or lithium. Where's that come from? So I would submit that's wrong. We can't just limit ourselves to 3 types of fertilizer. Now, another thing that industrial ag is big on, quantity is all that matters. I don't care how you get pounds on that cow. Feed it old Skittles if you want to, because I'm going to pay you for how much it weighs at the end. Right? Quantity is what farming is after, not quality, not even thought of, frankly, sadly, because of a lot of reasons. I'm not blaming the farmer for this. We've been walked down that path because of the large system. Here's how I want you to think. Sick plants attract insects. Sick plants attract insects. Look at insects like a disease. They only show up if your plant is deficient in nutrition. Okay, we'll talk a little more about that. Weeds grow best in poor soil. If we had phenomenal soil, which I happen to have a bucket of it up here, homemade stuff, most of the things that I call weeds won't grow very well in here. We'll talk more about that. That may be kind of mind-blowing. What feeds the plants? We already talked about that. The biology does. 24/7, 365, the biology knows what and when to feed the plant if we give them a chance. And they're going to be trying to feed them all 90 minerals if they have access to all 90 minerals. That's where the human can sort of help. Oh, I don't have enough whatever in the soil. Let me Give them some bone meal or some whatever, so they got more raw material to work with. And I would submit to you as a homesteader, quality is all that matters to you. Quantity, not so much. You need enough tomatoes, but don't grow woody cardboard tomatoes. It doesn't do you any good to eat them. It wasn't worth your resources, your effort to make them. So insects, let's look at that a little more. Dr. Phil Callahan, phenomenal, brilliant scientist. He started discovering this as a soldier in World War II. He was a radioman working in Ireland, and I don't have time for all the details. But throughout his career, he looked at how do insects know where to get to? How do they know where to find their mates? How do they know how to find what to eat? Those antennas on their head, hopefully we can relate to that. They're just like the antennas in our cell phone. They home in on electromagnetic frequencies. Sick plants give off a different frequency than healthy plants. So the sick plant sends out a beacon. Come find me, come find me, come find me. Mother Nature uses those insects to eliminate the weak. So if you have holes in your plants, the first thing you should be thinking is, I've got a sick plant. Not, I'm short on 7 dust. Mother Nature is trying to help you out by saying, this isn't good enough for you to eat. Let me hurry up and kill it so that you don't eat it. So the key metric for that is, we talked about this yesterday, a refractometer. You can take a leaf off your tomato plant and squeeze it, put some juice on this and look at it. If your Brix gets to 12 or higher, in general, the insects won't bother your plant. Again, that may sound like BS, but I've seen it for real. Out in my pasture, I look at plants. Oh, the insects are on those. Why? Oh, I get a Brix of 5. Plants right next to it that there's no insect damage whatsoever. Brix of 12, 15, 20, whatever it turns out to be. Same exact thing in the garden, which we'll talk about. Tomato hornworm. Anybody ever seen those? Yeah. Why are they there? Because you've got too low a Brix in your plants. Weeds. Weeds do not just grow, as I said, in healthy soil, necessarily. Weeds are workers on behalf of Mother Nature. We'll use dandelions as an example. As we understand it, if there is a calcium deficiency in your yard, Mother Nature will send in the dandelions to put down a deep taproot and pull up calcium and deliver it to your soil. We think, oh my gosh, I have dandelions. Let's get Scott's turf builder and kill every one. With no understanding that the root cause is a lack of calcium. So if I was to put on some calcium, I could speed up nature's evolution, because nature puts the dandelions there maybe for 5, 10, 15, whatever number of years, until they've passed the baton off to the next soil builder. She's always trying to build the soil for you if you let her. So start to look at the weeds that way. They are a tool that I can use, much cheaper than a soil test, to tell me what's going on in my pasture. So if you build up what's missing, the weeds go away. I'll show you pictures of that in action. So with that, I tell you to manage for what you want. Don't get fixated that your pasture has broom sedge and buttercups in it, and that you need a herbicide to fix that problem. Look ahead and say, 10 years or 3 years from now, I want more clover than I have today. I want more orchard grass than I have today. I want more fescue than I have today. And as you work towards that, the weeds go away because you fixed the soil. Couple of great books on that. When Weeds Talk and Weeds Control Without Poisons. Absolutely phenomenal. Got to watch my time here. Let's see. So, in general, what are we asking you to do? As you start to understand these principles, they feed right into Gabe Brown. He doesn't necessarily talk about all the things that we just talked about, but his principles apply those things, if you will. Limit soil disturbance, armor the surface, never leave the soil bare if you can help it. Throw old hay down if that's all you got, but cover up the bare spot. Build diversity, living roots in the soil, and integrating animals. Phenomenal book. If you haven't read it, I couldn't recommend it more. Now, I'm going to ask you, in applying these principles, to become a microbe farmer. We just taught you all you need to know about the microbes, quite frankly. Probably maybe more than some of you wanted to know. But I want you to understand the workers that are there for you. Now, hopefully you can better care for those workers. And some of you, if this is the first time you're seeing this, you may say, holy crap, this is complicated. I don't have a microscope. I don't know what to feed them, da-da-da-da-da. But they're just like small dogs and cats. They need air, water, food, and comfort. That's all any of us need. Air, water, food, and comfort. So I would submit you're all probably microbe farmers from way back. Have you ever made a pizza, bread dough, homemade wine? What'd you do? You got some yeast, dormant microbes. You brought them together with what? Air, of course, food, sugar, flour. You brought them together with water, of course. And then you put them in a comfortable place, maybe a warm place to rise, right? You all been a microbe farmer already. Now start to broaden your scope. Think of a bigger scale. So when it comes to your soil, you want some yeast. Where do I find the equivalent of yeast for my soil? We won't have time to go in detail in all these, but these are just a rough list. Your cattle manure has microbes in it. Your chicken manure has microbes in it. Your neighbor's cattle manure has microbes in it. Earthworms have microbes. They have a microbiome just like us. When an earthworm goes through the soil, that entire poop channel is delivering microbes to the soil. As long as we keep the Roundup away, it procreates. Static composting. Every time a tree falls in the woods, it's a compost pile. So you can make simple compost if that's all you have time and energy to do. Dump a bunch of stuff on the ground and let nature recycle it. We do that. We have a static compost pile. It doesn't even look pretty. Dead chickens go in it. Wood chips go in it. I don't baby it at all. Several years later, I have stuff that looks just like this, and it's loaded with microbes. Worm composting is great. That's something that you can easily do at home, even in an urban environment. You can make your own worm composter. You can go visit my friend John over here at Hiwassee Products. He's got a beautiful machine you can look at, how to make worm castings. They're worth their weight in gold. So there are pros and cons to all these. Again, we don't have a lot of time to go into it. If I forget to mention at the end, we're going to do a couple classes here at Rory's, one in July, one in August, where I'll actually spend a day with whoever wants to come, and we'll physically do some of this stuff. And I'll walk you through exactly how to do it so you can go back home and grow your own microbes. Korean natural farming is a method. There are commercial products, good ones and bad ones. Here's a commercial product I like to use, mycorrhizal fungi spores. I dump some mycorrhizal fungi spores in to promote that fuzzy-looking root that we saw. So in pictures, there's some examples of microbes and some homemade worm buckets, if you will, real easy to do. There's me making stuff. That's what we do in class. Real quick as a demo for you. Once I get my microbes, this is a handful of what I have in the test tube. I make this about 5 different ways because diversity is key, or is better. So I love this stuff. So once I get it, I've only got a little bucket here. But with this little bucket, I could probably treat an acre. I'm not going to go sprinkle it on. But the simplest thing to do, if you're on a budget, you can get an old nylon stocking or a sock. I spend $20 and get these compost tea bags. All right? So I put a handful, 2 handfuls of compost in here. And then, bear with me a quick sec. I do it this way because I'm older and I don't want to hurt my back. So I stack them up. I got 2 gallons of water in this. I put microbes in this. And now I just dip it in the water and I massage it with my hand, just like this. Nothing complex, just like I'm massaging my wife's shoulders, which she will tell you I never do enough. So here we go. I'll just show you how it works. Okay, everybody get that? Not very scientific, pretty simple. I have frugally used a very small asset that I had. I've made what looks like muddy water. If I put this under a microscope, you would see all our friends, bacteria, fungi, protozoa, and nematodes. Now what I can do is if I'm getting ready to plant a garden, I can take little cups of this out and soak my seeds in it before I plant them. Soak them, dry them, plant them. As soon as that seed germinates, who's there? All their friends. Just like giving them a probiotic before you ever plant them. All right, real simple. If you plant a tomato plant, take a cup of this and pour it in the roots when you put it in. Put those mycorrhizal spores in there. You're giving them probiotics again as you plant it. Plant a tree, do that. You can throw a handful of the compost in there if you got enough, but the liquid is a great way to go. So that is very simple. That's the simplest way to do it. I used to do it by hand exclusively, and you can see that might take a while if I want to make 12 gallons. I massage it for generally about a minute. Remember, I'm an engineer, so I got to time everything. Not saying you have to, but about a minute. So I'll make that nice muddy water. If I want to make a bigger batch, I use a bigger bag. And you can buy equipment to do this. I remembered my childhood. Grandma's farm. We had an old Maytag washer, so I bought one for $100 on Facebook. I fill this up like a bag of dirty socks. I put a zip tie on top. 8 pounds of compost goes in here. 12 gallons of water goes in there. I agitate it for 45 seconds. I flip it over. I agitate for 45 seconds. When I first did this was a test. So when I looked at it under a microscope, hadn't hurt anybody. Everybody was floating in the water, nice and happy. Gravity feed. There's no pump to macerate my biology. Gravity feed it into buckets. And then I take those buckets out and put them on the pasture. And I'll show you a picture of that as we go here quick. Okay, so when I do a test now, I'll get out my microscope and I'll look at that mix, not saying you have to do this at all, but I will assess the biology quantity. How much bacteria do I have relative to fungi, et cetera? So that's a soil test of the soil food web type. If you decide you ever want to do this, you can go out to soilfoodweb.com, and she's got a list of labs out there that do this. So here's some concrete examples of it. The biological product that I have up here that I just pulled out of that bucket, this would have been a test that I did on that some time ago. You can see the blue column is bacteria, the red is fungi, the yellow is protozoa, and the orange is nematodes. So the far left of this, do you see how much life's in it? All the stuff I want in the right ratios. I engineered it and made it that way. I'm a microbe farmer, so I created what I want. The second column over is a commercial mix I bought from the nursery. I was in a hurry, so I just went and bought a pickup load and dumped it in. When I got around to testing it, see what life's in it? Some bacteria. That's about it. No nematodes, no protozoa. The one I really like to foot stomp from a nutrient density standpoint is I went back to my home state of Iowa and just randomly grabbed some dirt out of a cornfield and a soybean field, and I tested them. What do I see? The only thing that's really in both of those samples is bacteria. And I would argue it's probably a very narrow range of bacteria because they've been dumping Roundup on it since probably 1996. So how nutrient dense is that corn and soy if we did a Brix test on it? I would say extremely low. But that's the foundation of our food chain because everything's got soybean oil in it, corn oil in it, et cetera. That's what we feed our livestock. Wonder why the hamburger isn't perhaps nutrient dense. So let's talk through some examples of this. So I brought home that bed mix. It wasn't very good, so shoot, we got to fix that. How do we fix that? We had to live with it. We had to fix it. So what do? Mikki is that brown liquid I made. She's got it in that can, so she's pouring it on the soil. Over the winter, we had cover plants in there, hairy vetch. Now that you understand, if you have solar plants in there collecting energy, they're pumping sugar into that ground not 24/7 necessarily, but as long as they're active, they're pumping sugar into the ground, feeding those microbes that Mikki just poured on. So we let that work over the winter. And in the spring, when I turned those roots over, that's where we got the fungi and the life. And the microorganisms now have a buffet. They get to come up and harvest all the residue from that hairy vetch. Bacteria, fungi are loving us now. And what happens when we plant plants in it? A lot better the second year. A lot better the second year. Now, I'm not satisfied at that point because my Brix readings weren't high enough. So I continue my research. Dr. Arden Anderson, phenomenal man. He's a medical doctor, farmer, ag consultant, all that. In this book, I can't recommend it enough. He had this recipe, basic generic recipe. Put this in your garden for mineral content if you're concerned you're deficient. So I went out and just sourced these quick, sprinkled them on. That recipe is per 1,000 square feet, so just do the math for whatever you have. So I applied that. And then Korean natural farming, I told you I went and trained in that. Phenomenal. Highly recommend it to you. You learn how to make calcium stuff out of eggshells, oyster shells. Korean natural farming is all about not buying a single thing from Lowe's or Monsanto, making it all yourself. So that is my suite of Korean natural farming. I got a calcium ingredient, apple cider vinegar. I've got digested fish as a nitrogen fertilizer, phosphorus, etc. So those are fermented plant juice. I ferment pokeweed and use it. So if I need an additional boost, I'll use this as a foliar spray. And this is what happened after we did that. Now, physical growth doesn't necessarily mean anything, but my Brix readings were way up. So I'm like, holy crap, we're doing well. We got life in the soil, we got minerals in the soil, and this was last year, and I saw these guys one day. We pulled 2 of them off the plants, and we never saw them again. Because we're that theory, get the Brix above 12, the insects don't come, it's a healthy plant. So we've had examples of proving that. This was one of them, no tomato hornworms. Now, this last winter, here's something we did. Hairy vetch is something I like because it lives all winter in Tennessee. Cereal rye is another great example. Not only these, you can use clover, you can use a variety of things. So that was winter rye. That was growing in our raised bed the entire winter. Can you now visualize what's going on in the root zone the entire winter? Life is going and getting ready for spring. Now, don't do what I did. I waited until I was ready to plant, and I had to physically turn that over with a fork. You can do that if that's your CrossFit routine, but you might be better just putting a tarp over it for 3 weeks ahead of time and let the biology go ahead and digest all that, because we did that in one case too, and it's beautiful. It was ready to plant in with no residue after about 3 weeks. But you can see what the overwinter crop did. Look at all that biomass in the soil. We're actually creating chocolate cake soil, aren't we? So now let's say you have the opportunity to do this from scratch. You didn't buy a commercial product. We're going to build the soil from the ground up. I don't care what you have today. It may be compacted clay, maybe rocks, whatever, I don't care. But knowing the principles that I know, I want to create a healthy environment for biology and minerals. So let me just lay it down on top, a lasagna. In its simplest form, I can just get a bunch of old wood chips and dump it on the ground. I can get $10 hay that somebody's trying to get rid of on Facebook because it was moldy. Dump it on the ground. It's food, right, for biology. Earthworms will come up underneath. If I can, I'll put cover plants in that. Here's a physical example of us having done that. This was a spot in our garden that we didn't use for several years. We put wood chips on it for one winter, about 6 inches deep. Let nature devour that. We put hay on it for 2 years, about 1 foot deep. Let nature devour it. Then I came back and poured biology on top. This is what it looks like today, I think. Corn, that's our corn patch, and the 3 sisters, if you will, all growing in there phenomenally well. Now, I was really excited by this example. Remember how I said if we get the soil right, the weeds will be unhealthy? This holy plant is a red root pigweed, what I label as a weed. Who showed up to devour it? Yeah, a pigweed beetle. My plants that I want to eat have no holes in them. So pigweeds don't grow as well in food soil. Here's an example for my pasture. This was an experiment. I feed hay to my cattle. They don't always eat it all because sometimes it's got brambles and gunk in it they don't want. So I just leave that residue in the field. Do you see that circle in the middle? I left it there over the winter, a big pile of gunk hay. In the spring, I came and poured some of this brown water all over it. I let nature work. Earthworms came up and worked. And then I said, let me do an experiment. Let me get my corn planter out, and I'll plant through there, because this is some of my worst pasture. So I drove my corn planter through that spot. Do you see these foot-tall plants outside the circle? Very poor, nutrient-deficient area. Look at how tall and healthy the ones are in where that old hay was. And it was as simple as that. I left a bunch of old hay over poor soil. I fed it with biology. I planted it, and that corn grew great, full ears of corn on it. It was pretty amazing to see. Okay, a little more science. If you want to do this from scratch, a little more scientifically, you can basically create a lasagna. I got a chance to do this at my good friend Richard Cleave's farm. A fellow by the name of David Yarrow came to help us through this. He's got a tremendous article out there, Soil Carbon Sink. If you want to read that, go to our website again. I've got a link to it out there. But he'll give you all the details on how much rock dust to use and all that sort of thing. But now that you understand the principles, you want food for biology, right? So let's start with wood chips on the bottom. Once we get that, we want some bacteria food. We want to work on the nitrogen to carbon ratio, so let me put some manure on there. Then I'm going to start putting things like biochar. Talk very briefly about that. And minerals. If I got rock dust, I'll start to put rock dust on there. I'm trying to build what I now understand to be a healthy soil from scratch. So that's what I'm doing. So I make a lasagna. I put down about 4 layers, and then I put another 4 layers on top. The second layer of biomass, instead of wood chips, might be leaves or hay, something finer because it's getting closer to the roots of the plant. So I want something that's more easily digested. Biochar, I mentioned very briefly. It's sort of like charcoal, but it's not. It's made with a different temperature profile. Pyrolysis is the actual process. But biochar in and of itself, if you've heard of it, it's not a fertilizer. It is carbon. Everything else has been burned out of it, so carbon is left. What speaks to me is it's a coral reef for microbes. And it also helps hold minerals and water. So it's a great benefit. In and of itself, though, it doesn't necessarily feed your plant on its own. But biochar is a great tool. So here's an example in our garden. We built this totally from scratch this year. We didn't buy it commercially. We put wood in the bottom, wood chips on steroids, hugelkultur. Then we actually started with cardboard. Then we went with the logs, put wood chips on top of that. Then I came back with, manure. That's what's in this bucket. When I have time, I collect chicken manure. I dry it on a tarp. I put it in a 5-gallon bucket. I can store it indefinitely, dehydrated. When I need it, I'll pull it off the shelf, bring it out, water it, if you will. And now I got active microbes. Everything's coming back to life. So that was my source of manure. Then we went out, we sourced, we used what we had. Again, I don't want you to have to go get everything. Use kind of what you have. Biochar, this is compost that we made in our static pile. So we're making a lasagna. We got to the second set of layers, we put leaves all over it. More compost, more manure, all that. And this one, Mikki's sprinkling blood meal and bone meal. I've got my muddy water that I'm pouring on, biology. So we're making a party for microbes, is really what we're doing. At the very end, we don't want to leave it uncovered because plants aren't growing yet, so we put chipped leaves on top. That's my wood chipper. We just chipped up leaves, covered the top. This is what it looks like today. It's doing really, really well. That's as far as it's grown so far this year. We planted it, about a month ago or so. So everything's taken off great in that stuff. So we're feeling really good about it. No insect damage anywhere yet. We did this in my friend Richard Cleave's pasture. Just piled this stuff up there. That's David Yarrow on the right, explaining to us how to build this. Richard and I both had a conversation about this. We didn't have as many flowers grow as we thought we would, but an important component in this is time. We did this in the spring and we immediately planted in it. A great time to do this is in the fall, so the microbes have an opportunity to do this, because give the microbes a chance to work. They're going to make better soil for you over time. So this is not a fix you're going to get done in 5 minutes. Look ahead. Get this started. Start to build that soil. You might make another layer of lasagna on it the following year. Just keep at this, and you're going to make deeper and deeper, better soil as you go. A quick caution on the materials. Now I got to speed up and wrap up here. Anything that's lived once can live again. So that you don't have to be too picky, but I want to caution you about persistent herbicides. I heard from a lot of people last year saying, gee, I got this hay from my neighbor, and now my tomatoes are dying. I got this cow manure from the stable, or the horse stable manure, and my plants are dying. Well, here's one of the reasons. Sadly, my fellow cattle producers get excited about using this product. It's called Grazon. Dow Agra came up with it. It's a persistent herbicide. It makes a pasture look really pretty by killing all the broadleaf weeds. But if you listen to Joel and Michael Pollan's talk the other day, the cattle that are most nutrient dense get a chance to eat the most diverse plants. That makes sense. So what we've done is wiped out diversity in the pasture because it looks good to us. Sort of like getting rid of the dandelions in our yard. So pyrrolid is the active ingredient in this, aminopyrrolid. It is tough enough that it will get into the hay, go through a cow, into the cow manure, go through the compost, and still kill your tomatoes. 2 years, okay? And I appreciate that, put in input for 2 years. Now, what breaks this stuff down? Your biology. So don't fret necessarily. If you get contaminated with this, build biology. They are the workers that actually physically break this stuff down. Here's a way to test for it. The North Carolina State publication that I showed up there, but it's on our website again. If you have something that's suspicious to you, I got cow manure from the stable. It was free. Gee, I wonder why. Ask them, first of all, has it been sprayed? If they look at you like you're crazy, they don't know. So just assume it's been sprayed. So a test you can do is set up so many pots of that stuff and so many pots of, say, a commercial potting mix. Plant pea seeds in it. I wish I remembered how many weeks this was, but I don't. But the ones on the right were our control. You can see they grew like normal pea plants. The one on the left, do you see they're all kind of deformed? Yeah, so that stuff never made it to our garden. We intercepted it ahead of time. Some great resources for you here. Phenomenal books. Lasagna Gardening tells you how to do this stuff. Korean Natural Farming, the short version of that's in the Jadam books. A new friend of mine, Nigel Palmer, wrote the book on top. Phenomenal. He really gets to the point with this. What's the best fertilizer for your tomato plant? Another tomato plant. Or last year's tomato plant. Last year's tomato went to all the work to collect all the nutrient density that was optimized for a tomato. So don't just throw it in the pasture. Put it back in your compost, or perhaps make a liquid fermented product out of it, which the Koreans are big on. They actually use weeds as well. Things like stinging nettle or comfrey are great sources of minerals for your plants. So now you've gone to all this work. Is my tomato worth a darn? Well, your first assessment of that is your taste buds. How does my tomato taste? I found this fascinating. Master Cho, he's the guy who is big on Korean natural farming and taught it to Americans. When he comes to validate whether you're a certified Korean natural farmer or not, he doesn't look at anything you're doing. He goes and tastes your produce. Based upon the taste of your produce, he knows if you're doing it right or not. Another data point on where nutrient density comes from, doing it right. So your taste buds are key. If you want to buy a $20 refractometer, you can do that on Amazon or an old one on eBay, something like that. You put some juice on here, look at it, and see what the number is. The higher the number, the better. I use these fancy squeezers in my pasture. I'll get clover, vetch, Johnson grass, whatever I want to test, squeeze it. Now, this is just something I do through the years. I want my bricks to be higher this year than it was last year. That's my goal. I know I'm not going to solve this all overnight. And that's what these things look like. Highbricksgardens.com, you can download this chart. Gives you some idea what the numbers mean. What is an excellent tomato? Well, Dr. Kerry Reams researched this for decades, so leverage his experience. So if we want to scale this up to pasture, I'm going to wrap this up here quick, guys. I can't make enough of this compost necessarily to dump on my pasture. I wish I could, but I don't have the money or the time. So what I'm going to combine are these principles. I'm going to get cattle and chickens out on there. I'm going to plant cover plants. Here's my tank of biology. I made 12 gallons of this. I poured it in the IBC tank. I filled that to capacity. And then I built this little PVC boom set, and I drive along and I dump it on the pasture. 1 acre per filling. 15 minutes of drive time works great. So what are we leveraging with cover plants? Dr. Kerry Reams' research indicates this. If a plant grows, 80% of its mass comes from the air. So if we make compost, we're hauling in biomass by the wheelbarrow full, right? What if we plant a seed and let 100, in this example, let's say we have a plant that weighs 100 pounds above ground. Below ground is essentially a mirror image, so 100 pounds below ground. 160 pounds of that came from the air. So if we let cover plants come in and build biomass, we don't have to haul in wheelbarrow loads full of wood chips. Hopefully that sort of makes sense. So in Tennessee, we've got this great guide right here that tells you all the possible types of plants you could plant in your pasture or in your garden, some of it in your garden. And that's where some of this comes from, hairy vetch and a mix that we put on our pasture. And now that you understand this, you know that these cover plants are pumping sugars into the ground. So diversity is important. If I can have 100 species of plants, I got thousands and thousands of species of sugar, which means I have thousands and thousands, or trillions of species, or millions of species of my little critters. So I'm making it better and better and better. Some of my favorite cover plants are these, hairy vetch, Austrian winter peas, etc. But we always plant a mix. That's a picture of buckwheat. After I move the egg mobile ahead, the chickens have had their dust baths and all that, I throw buckwheat seed in there this time of year. And it takes right off and fills in the gaps. So on the pasture, we do rotational grazing. We keep the cattle moving. On the ground, what do you see? The cattle have laid down a whole layer of organic matter for me, right? Sort of like the lasagna method. But the cattle did it for me. They ate what they wanted. They tromped the rest down. So I've already got a base layer of organic matter. Now what do? I bring out my biology. I dump it on. What do I get when I plant cover plants? I get food like this for my cattle. That's right. That's on the 15th of March. I couldn't help but notice this as I drove around Tennessee. This was somebody else's farm on the same exact day. So when you start to see this stuff, you can't help but see it. It's like, what is nutrient dense about anything in that entire pasture? Can't be. The beef won't be nutrient dense. So, broom sedge, anybody seen it? You familiar with it? It looks like that. It is a sign that you have dirt instead of soil. So cattle don't like it. So we had bumper crops of that on our farm every year when we first showed up. I didn't run out and get 2,4-D and spray it to try and kill the broom sedge. I thought we're going to fix the soil. So applying all of these methods, this particular hill used to be covered with broom sedge. This isn't a perfect apples to apples comparison, but now broom sedge is an endangered species on this hill. And all we did was what we just talked about, all of those principles, and it took a few years. If you're a row crop farmer, you can do very similar. Rick Clark is a phenomenal example. He plants ryegrass, lets it grow real tall, crimps it, knocks it flat, and then he plants in it. He's got a layer of organic matter covering up the ground. He plants in it. And he's given up on genetically modified crops and pesticides. So, we're out of time, and at the end, if you want more information, please go to our website. We try to make it helpful for you. My desire is to teach you how to fish, if you will. I want you guys to go be successful, because it's going to take all of us to make a dent in any of this. Thank you all.